Okay, this is number 12 from page 140. The lesson 9-1 practice, part 2. So the first step was make a equal 1. But if you notice on a, 12a here, a already equals 1. So we can actually skip that first step and go ahead and move our old constant out of the way. And that leaves us with x squared minus 4x. Leave that blank there. Equals 12. Yep. And then we got to figure out what number completes the square. So think 2 times what gives us negative 4. And that's going to be negative 2, which means then that we'll square negative 2 to find our constant. So that's going to be 4. Then we have to factor it. Factor this. It's going to become x minus 2 squared, and you can check that. Divide by 2, and then square it. And then 12 plus 4 is 16. Then we can just solve it. Take the square root of both sides. We get x minus 2 equals plus or minus 4. And then add 2. And we get x equals 2 plus or minus 4. So there, we can definitely combine those two. We have one where x equals 2 plus 4, which is 6. And then we have one where x equals 2 minus 4, which is negative 2. So that's the first one. All right, on B. Notice that a does not equal 1, so we need to go ahead and divide everything by that leading coefficient to force it to be 1. So I have x squared minus 5 halves x minus 3 halves equals 0. Let's move the old constant out of the way. And that leaves us with x squared minus 5 halves x. You might have been tempted to make that a decimal, and you can. That might work in this case. Equals 3 over 2. So we need to figure out what number will complete this square here. And I have a feeling it's going to be fractions, so I'm going to leave my blank down here. So this one's a little tricky. 5 halves. Half of 5, basically here, what we're going to end up doing is half of 5 halves. 2 times what gives us 5 halves? Well, that would be 5 fourths. How do I know that? Think about it this way. Half of 5 halves is like 5 halves times 1 half. You know, take half of something. And so that gives us 5 fourths, because you do 5 times 1 and 2 times 2, which is 4. So we're halving this number to get this number. And then that means we have to square 5 fourths, square the top, so that's 25, and square the bottom, so that's 16. So we're adding 25 over 16 to both sides. Now we need to factor it, and we're going to get x, and actually that should be negative, right, because it was minus. Minus 5 fourths squared, and now we need to combine these guys over here. I got 16, so I need to multiply by 8 to get common denominators, so that's going to be 24 over 16 plus 25 over 16, so that's going to be 49 over 16. Then we can take the square root and get x minus 5 fourths equals plus or minus. Square root of 49 is 7. Square root of 16 is 4. So that worked out to be perfect squares. I'm going to add 5 fourths to both sides. So I have x equals 5 fourths plus or minus 7 fourths. And we can definitely combine those. 5 fourths plus 7 fourths is going to give us 12 fourths, which is 3. And then 5 fourths minus 7/4 is going to give us negative 2/4, which simplifies down to negative 1/2. So our answers are 3 and negative 1/2. So that was B. Let's shrink it down. Okay, C. Notice that our A already equals 1, so we don't have to do the whole divide all the things. We're going to go ahead and move our old constant to make room for our value that completes the square. So I need to figure out what number can I add that will complete the square. So we think 2 times what gives us 6? Well, that would be 3. And then 3 squared would be 9. So our number is 9. Then we factor it and we get x plus 3 squared equals 11. Check it. Divide by 2 and then square it. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. Now we can solve it by taking square roots. X plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 11. 11 is prime, just 1 times 11, so I can just go ahead and subtract 3. And I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 11. That's my answer. Okay, on D. Okay, notice that our A value does not equal 1, so we need to go ahead and divide all the things by the leading coefficient, which is 3. Forces that to be 1. So we have x squared plus 3x plus 2/3 equals 0. Let's move that old constant out of the way, so subtract 2/3. And I get x squared plus 3x. Leave room for our new constant. And what we add to one side, we have to add to the other. So that's why I do 2 blanks. Blank here and a blank here. To figure out what goes in the blank, 2 times what gives us 3? Well, since 3 is not divisible by 2, it has to be 3/2. And then that would mean 3/2 squared would be 9/4. So I'm going to add 9/4 to both sides. And then factor this guy. So it's going to be x plus 3/2 squared. And then combine like terms. So combine these fractions over here. 3 and 4. So I'm going to have to multiply both of these guys to get common denominators. So I got negative 8 over 12 plus 27 over 12. Negative 8 plus 27 is going to give us 19 over 12. That's real pretty, ain't it? I'm going to double check that. Pretty sure it's right. Yeah. Okay, now we can take the square root. And I got x plus 3/2 equals plus or minus whatever this hot mess is going to be. So we have the square root of 19 over the square root of 12. So notice the 12 can be broken down into 3 times 4, and then 4 is 2 and 2. So we can factor out a 2. So 2 on the outside with a 3 left over. 19 is prime. It's just 19 at 1, so it's going to stay in the house. And we can't have a radical in the denominator, so we're going to multiply by the square root of 3 on top and bottom. I'm going to move this down. So I have, nope, I don't want the negative sign. 3 times 19, which is 57. And on the bottom, I still have this 2 here, but now I have 2 times 3. So these two come together to make the 3. So I have the square root of 57 over 6. Subtract 3/2 from both sides, and just slip that right in there. So x equals 3/2 plus or minus the square root of 57 over 6. Whew. That was an interesting one. I'm actually gonna look in my book real quick to make sure. Okay, E. Notice how E has a leading coefficient of 1, so we don't have to do that divide thing at the beginning. Go ahead and move your old constant, x squared minus x, leave a blank, equals -5. In our blank, we need to find the number that completes the square. So 2 times what gives us -1? Well, that would have to be -1/2. And then we'll square -1/2 to get 1/4. We add 1/4 to both sides. And now we need to factor. That's going to become x minus 1/2 squared. Combine these guys over here, and I'm going to write this a little neater. 1/4. So we need common denominators, so I need to multiply by 4 on top and bottom. -20/4 plus 1/4. It's going to be -19/4. Isn't that a lovely number? And then we take the square root, and I get x minus 1/2 equals plus or minus. So we need to simplify the square root of -19 over the square root of 4. Well, the square root of 4 is just 2, so that's helpful. And then -19 is just going to be -1 times 19. 19 is a prime number, so I can't break it up anymore. I'm going to change our square root of -1 to I and leave the 19 in the house. So we have I radical 19 over 2. We can add the 1/2 to both sides. X equals 1/2 plus or minus I radical 19 over 2. That's the answer. Okay, last one. Notice our leading coefficient is not 1, so we got to do the divide all the things. So I have x squared equals, x squared plus 2/5 x plus 3/5 plus 0. This book must hate us giving us numbers like that. Okay, so I'm going to subtract our old constant from both sides. Leave space for our new constant. I'll throw in a blank for our new constant, so plus blank. What I add to one side, I have to add to the other. Now, we've got to figure out 2 times what gives us 2/5. So the way we're going to do that is think, to find half of 2/5, we multiply by 1/2. So we're going to get 2/10 here. So we'll have to square 2/10 to get our blank, so that's 4 over 100 plus 4 over 100. Factor, it's going to be x plus 2/10 squared. We need common denominators over here. Change 5 to 100 by multiplying by 20. -60 over 100 plus 4 over 100. Is that going to be -54 over? Okay, I made one tiny mistake right here. When I did -60 plus 4, I should have got -56. Okay, so I still have x plus 2/10, which we figured out we could simplify to 1/5. So I'll go ahead and do that now. And then square root of negative 56 over square root of 100. Well, the square root of 100 is 10, and then negative 56. It's going to be negative 1 times 56, and then 56 is 2 and 28. 28 is 2 and 14, and 14 is 2 and 7. 2 times 7. So the negative 1 is going to give us an I, and then we have two 2's with a 2 and a 7 left over. So it's going to be 2I, and then we multiply these back together, 14. And if you notice, I got 2 and 10 here, so I can reduce those. So I subtract the 1/5 to both sides. And I get x equals negative 1/5 plus or minus I radical 14 over 5, because I divided both of these by 2. And there's the correct answer.